The first time I saw him, I swore under my breath, convinced God had a terrible sense of humor. I wanted a roommate who would pay rent on time and not leave hair in the sink. Instead, I got a brooding chef with eyes like dusk and a way of chopping onions that made me wonder if I'd somehow wandered into a cooking show audition. "Rent's due the 1st of the month," I told him flatly, even as my gaze betrayed me, flicking toward the way his shirt clung to his shoulders. "And I don't do weird roommate bonding rituals." He didn't answer, just gave me a quiet nod, put down his duffel bag, and walked straight into the kitchen like he already belonged there. I thought it was arrogance. Later, I realized it was survival. The apartment had never smelled like anything other than takeout and cheap coffee until Nathan moved in. That first night, I heard clattering from the kitchen and assumed he was the kind of guy who accidentally burned ramen. I stumbled out, ready to curse him out for filling my place with smoke, but instead, there it was, a pan simmering with garlic, butter, and herbs. The scent hit me so hard I froze in the doorway. He glanced at me, unfazed, as if he hadn't just turned my rundown apartment into a 5-star restaurant. "Hungry?" he asked, his voice low, steady, like it wasn't a big deal. "No," I lied, my stomach growling loud enough to betray me. He gave the smallest ghost of a smile, turned back to the pan, and plated the dish anyway. Pasta with seared chicken, a drizzle of sauce that looked like something out of a glossy magazine. I stood there, suspicious, until he pushed the plate toward me. "It's just food," he said simply. But it wasn't. Not to me. I didn't know what his story was then, only that he carried himself like a man with secrets he'd rather bury than share. His silences weren't awkward. They were heavy, like he was carrying conversations with ghosts. And me? I was a mess of sarcasm and late rent payments, using humor to mask how lonely life could get in a city that didn't give a damn whether you existed or not. We were opposites, oil and water. But then came the dinners. Every night, without fail, Nathan cooked. He never asked if I wanted food, just made it and slid a plate in front of me before sitting down with his own. And every night, I told myself I didn't care, that I wasn't looking forward to it, that the way he glanced at me when he thought I wasn't watching wasn't doing something strange and dangerous to my chest. But it was. God help me, it was. The turning point came on a Thursday. It had been the kind of day that made me want to crawl out of my own skin. Me boss yelling, my rent overdue, my heart weighed down by the constant reminder that I was drifting through life without purpose. I walked into the apartment ready to collapse, and there he was, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted with flour, rolling dough on the counter like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You look like hell," he said matter-of-factly, without glancing up. "Thanks," I muttered, kicking my shoes off. "You really know how to charm a guy." That earned me the faintest smirk. He cut the dough into neat strips, tossing them into boiling water. "What are you making?" I asked, leaning against the counter, watching his hands work. "Something my mom used to make," he replied, voice softer this time. It was the first personal thing he'd ever shared. My chest tightened at the vulnerability hidden in those few words. "Must have been nice," I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked, and in that moment, I realized how much he understood about silence, about loss, about needing to fill the empty spaces with something: food, laughter, anything to make the ache less sharp. Dinner that night wasn't just dinner. It was communion. The line between us blurred faster than I wanted to admit. One evening, after a bottle of cheap wine and too much laughter, I found myself standing way too close to him in the narrow kitchen. He leaned in to grab something from the top shelf, and my breath caught as his arm brushed mine. Our eyes met. For one impossible second, the world tilted. Then he pulled back, his jaw tightening, like he'd just remembered some unspoken rule. I laughed too loud, cracked a joke about personal space, and shoved the moment into the deepest corner of my mind. But it lingered. God, it lingered. Nathan wasn't just cooking food. He was dismantling me, piece by piece, breaking down the walls I'd built to survive. And I hated him for it almost as much as I needed him. Because every time he set down a plate in front of me, he wasn't just feeding my stomach. He was feeding the parts of me I didn't even realize were starving. And I was terrified of what would happen the day I couldn't hide from it anymore. It started with silence. Not the comfortable kind we'd grown used to during late-night dinners, but something sharp like the edge of a knife. Nathan had been staring at his phone for nearly 10 minutes, his jaw tight, his knuckles pale against the glass. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual even though the weight in his posture said otherwise. He didn't look up. "Yeah." A lie. One so thin I could see right through it. "Cool," I muttered, stabbing at the food he'd made, some kind of lemon chicken that deserved better than my distracted appetite. Because nothing says, "totally fine," like glaring at your phone like it murdered your family. That got his attention. He shot me a look, not angry exactly, but defensive, the kind of look you give someone who's getting too close. "Drop it, Will," he said quietly. But I couldn't. Something about him, about the way he carried this invisible storm, made me reckless. "What is it? Ex-boyfriend? Debt collector? Secret double life as a hitman?" I smirked, but my heart wasn't in it. His lips twitched like he almost wanted to smile, but then the wall slammed back into place. "It's nothing." And just like that, the silence returned. For days after, I couldn't stop noticing the cracks in him. The way he'd vanish into his room after cooking, the nights he didn't sleep, the dark circles under his eyes he tried to hide by looking down when he talked to me. One night, I came home later than usual. The apartment smelled faintly of smoke, not from food, but from something acrid, heavy. I followed it to the fire escape, where Nathan sat hunched over, cigarette glowing between his fingers. I froze. I'd never seen him smoke. "You know those things kill you, right?" I said, trying for humor. He didn't turn around. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." My chest tightened. "Jesus, Nathan." Finally, he looked at me, his face illuminated by the glow of the cigarette, and I realized then how much pain he carried in silence. "Don't worry," he muttered. "I'm not planning on disappearing anytime soon." But the words didn't comfort me. If anything, they terrified me more. The shift between us was subtle but irreversible. I started paying attention, noticing the way his hands sometimes trembled when he cooked, the way he lingered over family recipes like they were the only thing tethering him to the earth. One night, he was kneading dough for bread, sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to his forehead. I leaned against the counter, watching. "You always this intense about carbs?" I teased. He shot me a look but didn't answer. His hands pressed harder into the dough, movements sharp, almost violent. "Okay," I said carefully. "What did carbs ever do to you?" He stopped then, his hands still buried in flour. And when he looked up at me, there was something raw in his eyes. "My dad used to make this," he said finally, voice hoarse. "Every Sunday. Before he left." The air between us thickened. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I managed was, "Left." He nodded, swallowing hard. One day he just walked out. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And my mom, his voice cracked. He shoved the dough aside, pressing his palms against the counter like he needed to ground himself. "She tried. God, she tried. But she couldn't carry everything. She died when I was 19. Heart attack. And He broke off, shaking his head. For the first time since I'd met him, Nathan wasn't calm, wasn't quiet. He was unraveling. I reached out, hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "You don't have to, I do," he cut in, his voice sharp but not cruel. "Because every time I cook, I remember them. It's the only way I know how to keep them alive. And if I stop," his voice faltered, "then what's left?" I didn't have an answer, so I didn't give one. Instead, I squeezed his arm. Stayed there with him, flour dusting both our sleeves, the silence no longer heavy but shared. After that, something shifted. We still danced around each other, still pretended the air between us wasn't thick with things unsaid. But now, every meal was heavier, richer, carrying not just flavor but memory. And me? I was falling no matter how hard I fought it. One evening, after too much wine and too many unspoken truths, I caught myself staring at him again. At the way his hair fell into his eyes. At the way his lips parted when he was lost in thought. "Stop looking at me like that," he said suddenly, without glancing up. I blinked, startled. "Like what?" "Like I'm something you want." The words hit me like a sucker punch. For a heartbeat I thought about denying it, laughing it off. But the look he gave, measured, vulnerable, almost pleading, pulled the truth right out of me. "Maybe you are," I whispered. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was electric. He set his fork down slowly, his chest rising and falling like he'd just run a marathon. "Will," he started, then stopped, shook his head. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then tell me." I pressed, my pulse racing. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw it all, the grief, the fear, the desperate need to protect himself from more pain. "I can't lose someone else," he said finally. "I won't survive it." My heart clenched. "Then don't," I said softly. "Don't lose me." For a long time, neither of us moved. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall, steady and unrelenting. Then, slowly, carefully, Nathan reached across the table and took my hand. His fingers were warm, steady, grounding. And in that moment, the walls between us began to crumble. But love, real love, never comes easy. The next storm was already on the horizon, and it was going to break us before it put us back together. If falling for Nathan had been a slow burn, the first real fight between us was a wildfire. It started over something stupid, dirty dishes left in the sink. "You could have at least rinsed them," Nathan muttered one night. His back turned to me as he scrubbed a plate like it had personally offended him. I rolled my eyes, flopping onto the couch. "Jesus, you sound like my mom. You know, the whole reason I wanted a roommate was to split rent, not get nagged about dish soap." He slammed the plate down harder than necessary. "You think this is about soap?" I sat up, startled by the heat in his voice. He rarely raised it. "Then what the hell is it about?" I shot back, more defensive than I meant to sound. He turned then, eyes dark, jaw tight. "It's about the fact that you don't take anything seriously. Not this apartment. Not your job. Not—" He cut himself off, his voice breaking. "Not what?" I pressed, my chest tightening. "Not me," he said finally, and the words cracked open something inside both of us. Silence swallowed the room. I stood, heart pounding. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" he challenged, stepping closer. His hands trembled at his sides. "Do you even know what you're doing to me, Will? Every night I cook for you. Every night I sit across from you and pretend I don't feel this, and you sit there cracking jokes like none of it matters." My breath caught. "Because if I don't joke, I'll lose it, Nathan. Do you get that? You think I'm not serious? I've been trying like hell not to fall for you because I know, God, I know you'll never let me in." His eyes widened. The storm between us shifted, electric and raw. "You already are in," he whispered. And then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been holding back for far too long. I grabbed him by the shirt, pulled him closer, and for the first time in months, everything made sense. Until it didn't, because the second our lips broke apart, he shoved me away like I burned him. "I can't," he rasped, shaking his head. "I can't do this." I staggered back, my chest hollow. "Why the hell not?" His eyes filled with something I couldn't name, fear, regret, maybe both. "Because everyone I love disappears. My dad, my mom, my—" He stopped, biting down hard on the words. "You're what?" I demanded, but he just shook his head, grabbed his jacket, and walked out into the night. He didn't come home until morning. I didn't sleep, just sat there on the couch, staring at the door like I could will him back. When he finally stumbled in, wet from the rain, his eyes were bloodshot, his shoulders sagging like the weight of the world had finally crushed him. "You can't keep running every time it gets hard," I said, my voice raw. "I'm not running," he whispered, though even he didn't sound convinced. "I'm protecting you." "From what?" I shot back. "From you? Newsflash, Nathani don't need protecting. I need the truth." For the first time since we met, he broke. He sat down at the table, buried his face in his hands, and let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob but close enough to tear me in two. "My little brother," he choked out. "Eli. He was 15. After Mom died, I tried to take care of him, tried to keep him safe, but I couldn't. I failed. He got in with the wrong people and one night his voice cracked. One night he never came home. They found him in an alley. Beaten so bad I couldn't even." He broke off, shaking violently. I froze, my heart splintering. "That's why I cook," he whispered. "Because food was the only thing I could give him, the only thing I could control. And it still wasn't enough. So don't you see, Will? I can't let myself love you. Because if I do, and I lose you too," his voice shattered, "I won't survive it." My chest ached. Every part of me wanted to wrap him in my arms, to promise him he wouldn't lose me. But promises like that are dangerous. I knew it. He knew it. Still, I couldn't stop myself. "You didn't fail him," I said, my voice fierce. "You were just a kid. What happened to Eli wasn't your fault, Nathan. And you don't get to punish yourself forever. You don't get to push me away just because you're scared." He looked up at me then, eyes wet, broken, searching. And I did the only thing I could. I pulled him into my arms. At first, he resisted, stiff and unyielding. But then his body collapsed against mine, his fists gripping the back of my shirt like I was the last solid thing in a world made of quicksand. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, his heartbeat frantic against my chest, mine trying to match it. For the first time, I wasn't joking. I wasn't hiding. I was just there. With him. For him. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days after were fragile, like walking on glass. We didn't talk about the kiss. Didn't talk about Eli. But something had shifted. The silences between us were no longer walls but bridges, heavy with meaning. One night, as he handed me a plate of food, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away. Another night, I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking, and this time I didn't look away. We were orbiting closer, pulled by a gravity neither of us could resist. But I knew the storm wasn't over, because loving Nathan was never going to be simple. And if I wanted him, really wanted him, I was going to have to fight for him. Even if it meant dragging him out of the shadows he'd been living in for far too long. And then came the night everything exploded. It was late, the city humming outside, when there was a knock at our door. Sharp. Relentless. Nathan stiffened instantly, his face going pale. "Who is it?" I asked, moving toward the door. "Don't," he hissed, grabbing my arm. But it was too late. I opened the door to find a man standing there, tall, rough around the edges, eyes scanning the apartment like he owned it. "You Nathan?" the man asked, his tone cold. Nathan's grip on my arm tightened. "What do you want?" The man smirked. "You still owe some people, and they're not as patient as me." My stomach dropped. "Nathan, what the hell is this?" But Nathan didn't answer, and in that silence, I realized the storm wasn't just his past. It was his present, and it had just found us. The man at the door was a ghost from Nathan's past, and he carried the storm with him. I could see it in Nathan's eyes, the way they darkened, the way his body tensed like a cornered animal. "You still owe," the stranger repeated, his voice steady, cruelly casual. "Money, favors. Doesn't matter. People are getting tired of waiting." My stomach twisted. "Nathan, what the hell?" Inside, Nathan muttered, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard. He pushed me back, shielding me with his body. The stranger smirked. "Cute. Protecting your boy toy. Didn't think you had it in you." Nathan flinched but didn't move. "Leave. Now." But the man just laughed, leaning against the doorframe like he had all the time in the world. "You've got until Friday," he said finally, his grin wide and ugly. "After that, no more warnings." Then he left, his footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving silence that felt louder than any shout. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Rent, dinners, secrets, and now this. "Nathan," I said slowly, trying to catch his eyes. "What was that?" He didn't answer, just slammed the door shut and leaned against it, his breathing ragged. "Tell me," I pressed, my voice shaking. But when he finally looked at me, his face wasn't anger. It was shame. "I thought I could outrun it," he whispered. "I thought if I worked, if I cooked, if I stayed quiet, it would never catch up. But it always does." I wanted to scream, to shake him. But instead I said, "So what? You owe money to some thug? That's not the end of the world." "It's not just money," he rasped. "It's everything. The people Eli fell in with, the ones who destroyed him, I tried to pay them off after he died. Tried to buy my way out of guilt. But you can't pay guilt away, Will. And you can't pay off people like them. They don't forget." My heart thudded painfully. "So you've been carrying this alone?" I whispered. "All this time?" He nodded, eyes burning. "Not anymore," I said fiercely. He shook his head. "I can't drag you into this. You don't know what they're capable of." "Then let me find out," I shot back. "Because I'm not walking away, Nathan. Not now. Not ever." His lips parted, like he wanted to argue, but no words came, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The next 3 days were chaos. Nathan worked double shifts, trying to scrape together money he didn't have. I scoured the city for help, calling in favors I wasn't sure existed, desperate for any way out. We fought. God, did we fight? About money, about trust, about me risking myself for nothing. "You're not nothing," I shouted finally, tears stinging my eyes. "You're the only thing that makes sense in this damn city, Nathan. Don't you get that?" He froze, breath hitching. And for the first time I saw Ithope. Fragile, terrifying, but real. Friday came. The knock on the door came too. But we weren't the same. Not anymore. This time Nathan didn't face them alone. I stood beside him, my hand brushing his, steady and sure. And when the man sneered, demanding what Nathan owed, I stepped forward. "You're not taking him," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "Not tonight. Not ever." The man laughed. "You've got guts, kid. Shame guts don't pay debts." But then miracle or luck or maybe just the universe giving us a break, the neighbor across the hall opened their door. And then another. And another. Eyes. Witnesses. The man cursed under his breath, realizing this wasn't his territory anymore. "This isn't over," he spat, but his eyes flicked to Nathan, then to me. "Careful who you tie yourself to." And then he left. For good this time. Nathan collapsed onto the couch the second the door shut. His hands shook, his chest heaved, and when I sat beside him, he buried his face into my shoulder. "I thought I'd lost everything again," he whispered. "But you stayed." "Of course I stayed," I said softly. "I told you I'm not going anywhere." He lifted his head then, eyes glistening, searching mine like he was trying to find a lie. But there wasn't one. So he kissed me, not desperate this time, not hungry or broken, but gentle, certain. And in that kiss, I felt the end of the storm. Weeks passed. The apartment smelled of garlic and rosemary, laughter replacing silence. Nathan still carried scars, still had nights where he stared too long out the window, lost in ghosts. But he wasn't carrying them alone anymore. And me? I found a reason to come home, a reason to stay. One night, as dawn crept over the city, I found him on the rooftop, watching the sky turn pink. "You ever think about the future?" I asked, stepping beside him. He smiled faintly. "I used to be afraid of it. And now," he turned to me then, eyes warm, steady. "Now," he said, "I just want you in it." The world stilled. I reached for his hand, held it tight, and for the first time I believed him, believed us, because sometimes love isn't fireworks. It isn't loud or perfect. Sometimes it's just two men on a rooftop, watching the sun rise, finally finding peace in each other's arms. And that was enough. That was everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.